welcome back to my channel. It is time for more end of year content, and this time around I want to tell you about all of the books that I've DNF'd this year, with the little caveat that it's all of the books that I DNF'd this year that I remember DNFing. One of my goals for 2023 was to keep better track of the books that I DNF'd, and while I think I mostly did that, there certainly are books that I've DNF'd that I forgot. Now, just a little disclaimer before I officially jump into this video, and that is I don't create these kind of videos for the sake of like dunking on any kind of book or to be negative. I think that it's really interesting to see the books that creators, booktubers are reading, and also to see which books they attempted to read that didn't work for them. I think that as someone who watches these videos, it's one, very interesting to watch, but two, it gives me more insight into what kind of stories don't work for the person that I'm watching. So that's my intention with this video. Without further ado, let's jump on in, because it may be cold outside, but it's hot as hell in here because I don't control the heating and it's always on 8 million degrees. Now, this is in no particular order. It's just in the order that I remember DNFing these books. So let's go through this list. The first one is Love and Other Words by Christina Henry. And what I'm going to tell you throughout this video is whether or not this is a hard DNF or a soft DNF. This is a soft DNF. This is a story about two people who were friends and then were lovers as teenagers, and they broke up, and it's many years later. The woman is engaged, the man is back in her life, and she has a lot of things to think about. I was mostly enjoying this. I think the reason that I DNF is just I was not fully invested into it. I think that if I read this in the right mindset, I would really love this story, but because I wasn't really in a romance mood, I was not doing it justice in my reading experience, and so I put this down for now. This is a soft DNF. Then I have Daughter of No Worlds. This is a very popular book, a fantasy that so many people love. I've said this before, but people tend to love this book because of like the cozy romantic element of the story. And while the political intrigue in here is high, and I do enjoy that aspect of it, I was not invested in the relationship between these two characters whatsoever. In case you don't know, Daughter of No Worlds is the story of a woman who, when she was a young child, her town was attacked and she was sold into slavery as a way to save her life. She buys her freedom at the beginning of the story, and she's now on a journey to try to get someone within power to do something about what's happening in the world. I just really was not that invested. I don't care about the romance between these two characters, and honestly, every minute that I read of it, I was like, I don't care. It's perhaps not the fantasy for me. I would not call this a hard DNF for the sole reason that I only have 2 hours left in the audiobook, and it's a very easy book for me to finish, but I just don't see myself giving this higher than 3 stars. And I have Superbia. I'm forgetting who this is by, but of course, as always, the covers are right next to me. Superbia is the sequel to Luxuria, and while I love Luxuria in a reading fan fiction at 2 a.m. kind of way, Superbia, I have a reading vlog on, which I will try to link in the description of this video in case you want to hear my full thoughts. But Superbia is following the sister of the Shadow Queen, the new Shadow Queen. She is a hunter, and that she used to hunt these shadow people who would feast on the negative emotions of humans, and she is obviously not welcomed. There's a lot of tension within the world, but this is supposed to be a romance, and she's supposed to have this undeniable connection to the general of the army within this world. I just didn't see it. I honestly think that he treated her like shit. I don't want to say there's ever a valid reason to treat someone like shit, because there isn't, but there was a very valid reasons why he would have resented her, considering the mass number of people that she murdered, number of his people that she murdered. I think that this was too early. Our main female character is Astrid. Astrid's story definitely should not have been the second book in this series. Astrid is such a controversial character with a lot of complexity that I think that she needed more time to really be integrated in this world before we ever got a love story. And I never believed the relationship between her and Soren. I genuinely feel like Soren just wanted to fuck her and really did not care about her at all. If there was a book I could dunk on, it would be this, but I'm not going to. I do not understand the mass amount of hype that this book got and why everyone who reads it loved it. I think that it was really poorly written. The world building was atrocious and I really hated it. So that's that. Then I have Yearning for Her by Tiffany Roberts, which is supposed to be like this fae romance with this plus size curvy main character who is going on a date with her boyfriend, and she thinks that he's gonna propose because it's a really fancy restaurant, something that she's always wanted to do. He's being like weird and he's like, oh my gosh, he's gonna propose. He doesn't. Instead, he proposes that they open their relationship and have it be a throuple, except that he was already dating the other woman, told the other woman that his girlfriend knows that they were poly. She did not know that. And so we have chaos, and she ends up running into this guy and having a one-night stand with him, but he's fae and they're mates. Now, everything about the initial first 15-20% of the story really worked for me. I was like, hell yeah. Monster romance, fae character who's really attractive. He's a succubus, so he's a sex demon, so really intense, like split scenes. But then we got into lots of on-page sexual assault, lots of really heavy topics, lots of dubious consent, and the story got very, very dark for what it is that I wanted. I wanted lighthearted fairy porn, and this is a very, very dark romance dealing with a lot of triggering subjects. Not that the romance between the two main characters is dark, just the story itself is dark. Some Desperate Glory. Now this is a buddy read. I have the Illumicrate special edition, which yes, did contribute to my ultimate decision to unsubscribe from subscription boxes like Fairy Loot and Illumicrate, but I will tell you more about that in a later video, as I've been saying, I feel like for a year. Anyway, you will hear my full thoughts on why I've done that. There was just some legwork I need to do. But anyway, Some Desperate Glory is a story of people who now live in space. They were attacked by these alien creatures on Earth, and Earth was completely and utterly obliterated. And we're following our main female character who lives on this spaceship of terrorists. To be quite honest with you, that's what they are, but she does not see herself that way. Our main character is also deeply homophobic, and she's not a pleasant person to read from. And this is supposed to be a story about like her development as a person and how she comes to realize that she is not the hero in this story. She is the villain, and she has been blindly, I'm forgetting the word of it. I want to say brainwashed, but that's not what I'm thinking of, to be this way. And while that's an interesting topic to explore, this is not a story I would have picked up on my own. And this is not a book that I would have purchased, let alone purchased a special edition of. And because it was a buddy read, I did try to read it and I got 50 or 60% of the way through. I could not get into it. I found the character so fucking annoying. I did not want to be, I think her name is Kit. I did not want to be in her point of view. I did not want to hear her thoughts. I had no care at all for this story, and I think that it was getting very, very dark. Plus there's a character in here who I'm like, that is so obviously the villain of the story, and he is so obviously going to do such horrific things that you are a fucking moron. And so I DNF'd for my own mental health and well-being. Oh, besties. I have Hopeless by Elsie Silver. This is on Kindle Unlimited, and while maybe at some point I plan to continue this, I don't think so. Quite honestly, this is part of the Chestnut Springs series, and I think this series is just okay. I know it's a top favorite for so many people. I know so many people love it, and they say, oh, I never liked cowboy romances, but now I do because Elsie Silver is just that girl. I think it's a mid-series. I'm sorry. I don't love it. I read Reckless and I gave that 3.5 stars. And then I read Heartless, which I gave 2 stars, and I'm not loving it. But I picked up Hopeless anyway because the delusion was strong. I was like, I will like a book in this series. And this one we're following Bo, and Bo is a veteran. He's come back from war, but he went through a very, very traumatic incident, which is why he was honorably discharged from service, and he's really struggling. And he's in his hometown just trying to like make it, trying to survive, trying to not to show how badly his PTSD is affecting him. And he also ends up forming this relationship with this woman named Bailey, who is many years his junior, who is a bartender and who has a difficult time in this town because of the reputation of her brothers and her father, who are all alcoholics or drug addicts and criminals, people who really do horrible things to people in this town. And everyone in the town associates that with Bailey as well, because she just happens to be part of this family, and they end up in a fake marriage of sorts. At best, I think that the reason they're in a fake marriage is tenuous, because Bailey's like, oh, it's because I have this last name. People associate me with this family. And Bill's like, well, that's not true. Marry me. Take my last name, Eaton, which has a lot of power in the little town that they live in, and people will stop treating you that way. And I was like, that's naive. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that she is part of this family, and so that reputation will always carry her, regardless of whether or not she changes her name. Tenuous at best. I just did not care about the relationship between Bailey and Bo, and I don't really care about this series, and so I DNF'd it. Hard DNF? I don't know. Maybe I'll finish it one day. Oh, TikTok. TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. I thought this video would be fun, but honestly, I just find myself feeling exasperated. I was doing a video where I was like, TikTok chooses what I read. And what I found was that a lot of the TikToks for book recommendations I was getting was coming from the author themselves, which is fine, except when the book is not edited. This is not the case with Bounded by Thorns. Bounded by Thorns is a story of this girl who like owns a bookstore, and some way or another she ends up taken into the fae realm. It's supposed to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's polyamorous. And when I tell you this read like bad fan fiction, this read like bad fan fiction. And no matter how interesting the plot could have been, the characters all felt exactly the same and very two-dimensional, and I was just not into the story, and so I DNF'd it, and that was a hard DNF. Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. This is a huge disappointment for me. This is a story of a best friend's mom, and it's sapphic. So we have a woman who is in college, it's her senior year, and she ends up hooking up with this beautiful, gorgeous, like older woman in this bar, only to find out the next day that the woman she hooked up with is her best friend's mother. And instead of dropping that relationship, they decide to continue it. Not because they are in love or they have feelings for each other, but because the sex is really hot. Now, the thing that I had issue with here is how immature our like college character felt, which yes, she is in college, but instead of reading like she was 21 or 22, she read like she was 16 years old. I kid you not, there is a scene where she is drunk at a party, goes outside, and texts something of the equivalent of, "Let me see your titties," to the mother. I could not. DNF. Teacher of the Year has such a beautiful cover. It is literally such a gorgeous cover. It is a male-male romance, single dad, preschool teacher, everything I should have loved, and I would have loved this, but the writing in this book is absolutely atrocious. That sounds really harsh, but it's really bad, and it needs a lot of refining, and I could not do it. You all know writing is one of my top things that I look for in my books. Yes, that sounds pretentious, but we all have writing styles that we prefer when it comes to our stories, and this just felt very unpolished to me. Stay Awake by Megan Golden. I think I mentioned this in a vlog at some point in my channel. It would have been around the May or June point, but I picked this up on a whim on what is now called Everett and was formerly Scribd. In this book, we're following a woman who can't remember anything. Anytime she falls asleep, she completely loses all of her memories for a certain amount of time. It could be the memories of the last day, or it could be the memories for several years ago. And she ends up waking up. I think she's like in a taxi or something, and for some reason or another, she ends up involved in like a murder case because there's some suspicion that she was involved in that, and she's trying to figure out what happens. And why I couldn't get into that is that the number of times the main character said, "Stay awake, I forget everything when I fall asleep," was astronomical. I read the first 10 or 11 chapters of this story, and I am not kidding when I tell you she said that exact same phrase at least 40 times. At least 40 times. And beyond that, she has this writing that just says, "Stay awake, I forget everything when I fall asleep," on her arm. Why wouldn't she write something more helpful? Call this person if you don't remember anything. Here's what you should do, blank, blank, blank. Her new address on her forearm. And she has friends who know that she has this condition. And when she comes to them very confused and stumbling around, instead of offering to help her, they're like, okay, bye. What kind of friendship is that? I was not buying it. DNF. Stolen by the Orc Commander is part of that same TikTok vlog that I told you about, where I had to create that rule that if it was being promoted by the author themselves, it could not count as a TikTok recommendation. I should have liked this. It's not edited. It's not edited. Grammatical errors, spelling errors, run-on sentences, things that don't make sense, plot holes. This needs an editor. Severely. Episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. Listen, I'm gonna tell you, this is a haunted house story where there was like some kind of crazy, mysterious research thing that happened in this house and it's been abandoned, and now there's this like group of paranormal researchers that have a TV show who are gonna go to this house and try to figure things out. And I don't know why I DNF'd this, and what I'm gonna tell you is not gonna make sense, but it was giving me a vibe that made me uncomfortable. Something about how some of those characters were being described, something about, I don't know. It was just giving me a vibe, and so I DNF'd it. And finally, Riv's Sanctuary, which is a sci-fi romance. Riv's Sanctuary is the story of this woman who gets kidnapped off of Earth, and instead of landing on a beautiful ice planet where she meets her 7-foot-tall blue alien mate who's gonna eat her out, she gets sold into slavery. And then she ends up as an exhibit at a zoo. And she manages to escape, and she ends up on this animal sanctuary because the person who rescues her, a man who buys her for the sake of being the third in his and his wife's relationship, but his wife is like, ew, what the fuck is that? And makes him get rid of her. Thinks that she's an animal despite her ability to clearly speak, communicate, show intelligent thought and reason. So she gets dropped off at this animal sanctuary, this farm. And the main guy who runs this farm is this very grumpy alien character, but he quickly realizes that she's not an animal and she really should not be here. And I just did not like this. I did not like this at all. I think that the main character was literally an asshole, and it's what showed me, or one of the things that showed me, that Grumpy Sunshine needs to be balanced so well, because the grumpy cannot be he's an asshole to the main female character. Not into that. And also, it was bizarre tonally. Like, there were so many dark scenes in here, but then there was humor that was not dark humor. It was just humor within those dark scenes. Like, there's this scene where they're in town and this little kid is literally publicly executed for no reason. And then the next like sentence, the characters are like joking. I hated it. I hate it. DNF. Was I expecting this to make me as angry as it did? No, but that just shows me the books that I DNF'd, I had reason to DNF for myself. Okay, even though I may have said things like atrocious, that doesn't mean that it's actually objectively bad. It means that it did not work for me. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you did enjoy it, and I'm gonna see you the day after tomorrow. Bye!